Have you ever heard a woman say something that didn't sit right with you, but you brushed it off thinking it wasn't important? Let me ask you, do you think people reveal their true character more in their actions or in the words they casually let slip? Drop your answer in the comments because many times the warning signs are right in front of us. We just choose to ignore them. Female psychology teaches us that words are rarely accidental. When a woman says certain things, even casually, they can reveal her true mindset and long-term intentions. The problem is, many men overlook these signs until it's too late, when emotional damage, wasted time, or broken trust has already taken its toll. In this video, we'll go through 5 specific things a woman may say that should make you pause, and, in many cases, walk away. These are not about shaming women, but about protecting yourself, your values, and your emotional well-being. By the end, you'll see how paying attention to subtle red flags can save you from years of unnecessary pain. And if you make it to the end, write "Sigh Insight" in the comments so I'll know you're serious about protecting your future. At first glance, when a woman says, "I don't need a man," it might sound like independence. And independence on its own is not a problem. In fact, Islam, psychology, and history all value self-sufficiency. But in relationships, the repeated insistence that she doesn't need anyone often hides something deeper: a wall. That wall can make it impossible to build true partnership. Because relationships thrive on interdependence, not isolation. Psychologists highlight that healthy connections come from balancing independence with vulnerability. If someone constantly projects that they need nobody, it's often a defense mechanism rooted in past hurt or pride. For example, a woman who says this may have been disappointed before and now chooses to protect herself with words. But over time, this creates distance. If she refuses to acknowledge any need for emotional support, intimacy, or even companionship, you're left in a one-sided relationship. Consider a real-life scenario. You try to offer help, maybe carrying something heavy or supporting her in a stressful situation, and instead of gratitude, she responds with, "I don't need you." 1 or 2 times may just be pride. But when it becomes a pattern, it shows that she doesn't value partnership. You're essentially being told that your role as a man is unnecessary. That dismissal eventually eats away at respect, which is the foundation of lasting attraction. Machiavelli once wrote that those who deny needing allies often end up weaker in the long run because isolation leaves them vulnerable. The same principle applies here. The refusal to admit needing someone doesn't make her stronger. It makes the relationship weaker. Love isn't about dependence, but about mutual reliance, where both people bring value to each other's lives. This phrase can also signal a competitive dynamic. Instead of seeing you as a partner, she may see you as an opponent to prove wrong. Over time, this energy shifts the relationship from supportive to combative. Many men ignore this red flag at the beginning, thinking it's just a strong personality trait, only to realize later that the lack of partnership creates loneliness even within the relationship. To be clear, valuing independence is healthy, but constant rejection of the idea of needing anyone, especially you, suggests that she's not open to teamwork, compromise, or shared vulnerability. Without those, there is no true intimacy. So here's the reflection. Are her words a sign of confidence or a warning of resistance to connection? If you've ever faced this situation, share your experience in the comments. You might save another man from ignoring this red flag. When a woman tells you, "You're too good for me," it may sound flattering at first. You might think she's admiring your qualities or showing humility. But in reality, this phrase is often a subtle push away. Psychologists note that when people use self-deprecating language in relationships, it can be a way of preemptively lowering expectations or signaling that they are unwilling to rise to yours. Think about what's really being said here. If she truly valued you and wanted to grow with you, she wouldn't highlight a gap between you two as an excuse. Instead, she would express admiration and show effort to meet you halfway. "You're too good for me" usually translates to "I can't or won't give you the kind of relationship you deserve." Rather than taking it as a compliment, you should see it as a warning. Consider a practical example. You treat her with respect, support her dreams, and show consistency. Instead of appreciating that and reciprocating, she repeatedly says, "I don't deserve you." Over time, you notice that her actions match her words. She makes little effort, avoids accountability, or even starts sabotaging the relationship. By telling you up front, she's lowering your expectations so she doesn't feel guilty when she falls short. From a psychological perspective, this is linked to self-sabotage. People who secretly believe they're unworthy of love often push others away before intimacy gets too deep. While you may feel compelled to prove her wrong, this usually leads to frustration. You end up investing more while she invests less, creating an imbalance that drains you emotionally. There's also a Machiavellian layer here. Sometimes saying, "You're too good for me," is a tactic. It keeps you emotionally hooked while she avoids commitment. By making you believe she's the one at a disadvantage, she creates sympathy and secures your attention without ever promising change. In the long run, that imbalance turns into disappointment. The key lesson is this: if she says you're too good for her and shows no signs of growth, take her words seriously. Don't cling to the fantasy of what she could become. Respect yourself enough to realize that someone who truly values you will step up, not step back. So here's the question. Have you ever been told you're too good for someone and later realized it was their way of pushing you away? Share your story in the comments. You might help someone recognize this red flag before it's too late. When a woman says, "My ex was crazy," it might sound like a harmless way of distancing herself from a past relationship. But often, it reveals more about her than about her ex. Psychologists warn that people who constantly blame others for failed relationships may struggle with accountability. If every past partner was crazy, chances are she's leaving out her own role in the conflict. Think about it. Healthy people may have bad experiences, but they usually explain them with balance, acknowledging both the mistakes of their ex and their own lessons learned. A woman who quickly dismisses her ex as crazy without reflection is showing you that she evades responsibility. This is dangerous because if problems arise between you and her, she might paint you with the same brush. Consider a practical example. You're on an early date, and she tells you about her ex. Instead of saying, "We weren't compatible and I learned a lot from it," she laughs and says, "He was insane. I don't know why I even dated him." At first you might laugh along, but later you realize she never takes accountability, even in her daily life. She's already rehearsing the story she'll tell about you if things go wrong. Machiavelli observed that people who constantly shift blame cannot be trusted because their loyalty is shallow. Applied here, if she sees herself as the perpetual victim and all her exes as villains, it shows she may lack the maturity needed for a healthy relationship. Instead of working through problems, she escapes by labeling others. From a psychological perspective, this can also be linked to projection. Sometimes people call their ex crazy to mask their own unstable behavior. If you notice contradictions like her stories not lining up or her reactions being overly dramatic, it's a sign you should pay attention to her actions more than her words. This doesn't mean every person who had a difficult ex is toxic. The real difference is in how she speaks about it. Does she show bitterness and blame or growth and perspective? Her words tell you whether she learned from the past or is doomed to repeat it. So ask yourself, When she talks about her past, is she showing you maturity or warning you about how she will treat you one day? Share your thoughts in the comments. You might help others recognize this subtle but important red flag. When a woman says, "I'm not ready for anything serious," most men hear it, but they don't believe it. They think, "She just needs time. If I prove myself, she'll change her mind." The hard truth? Her words usually mean exactly what she said. Psychology teaches us that people often reveal their true intentions directly, but it's our wishful thinking that blinds us. Ignoring this red flag can lead to months or years of wasted time and emotional investment. In female psychology, this phrase often signals avoidance of commitment. It may not mean she dislikes you. It could mean she enjoys your attention, your effort, or the comfort of your presence, but she doesn't see you as someone to build with long-term. That distinction is critical. She may accept dates, conversations, and even intimacy, but she has already drawn a boundary you can't cross. And when someone tells you their limit, you need to believe them. Consider a real-life example. A man meets a woman who tells him early on, "I'm not ready for anything serious." He assumes that with enough care and persistence, she'll eventually see his value and change her mind. Months later, she walks away saying, "I told you from the beginning." This isn't cruelty, it's honesty. The problem wasn't her words, but his refusal to listen. Machiavelli warned leaders never to waste resources on people who openly declare they won't be loyal. The same principle applies here. If she's telling you she's not ready, your time, energy, and affection are being invested in a dead end. Hoping to win her over only puts you at a disadvantage and leaves you vulnerable to disappointment. From a psychological perspective, some women use this phrase to keep things convenient. By saying she's not ready, she frees herself from expectations while still benefiting from your attention. For you, it feels like a relationship. For her, it's just a temporary arrangement. That imbalance always ends with one side hurt, the one who ignored the warning. The healthy response is simple. Respect her words and move on. A woman who truly wants something serious won't hesitate to show it. Her actions and words will align, and she will make space for you in her future. Settling for less only delays the right opportunity from reaching you. So here's the reflection. Have you ever stayed in a situation where she told you she wasn't ready, but you convinced yourself otherwise? Share your experience in the comments. You might help another man avoid falling into the same trap. This phrase might sound innocent at first, but it's one of the clearest signs of emotional manipulation. When a woman says, "If you loved me, you would," she's not making a request. She's trying to control your behavior by questioning your love. Psychologists call this conditional affection, where love and care are tied to obedience. Over time, this habit doesn't just drain a relationship, it erodes your self-respect. The problem isn't that she asks for things. Every healthy relationship involves requests and compromises. The red flag is when requests come packaged with guilt and manipulation. For example, "If you loved me, you would stop seeing your friends," or "If you loved me, you'd buy me this expensive thing." Notice the pattern. Her needs are presented as tests of your devotion. Instead of mutual respect, the relationship becomes a series of traps you're pressured to pass. Consider a real-life example. A man wants to spend a weekend working on his goals. His partner says, "If you loved me, you'd spend every moment with me instead." Instead of respecting his ambition, she uses his affection against him. At first, he might give in, but over time, he begins to resent her, and she begins to lose respect for him. Why? Because manipulation never builds love. It only builds control. Machiavelli wrote that rulers often use fear and guilt to control subjects, but in relationships, this tactic is poisonous. A woman who constantly tests your love with conditions is showing you she doesn't respect your independence. And without respect, love cannot grow. What begins as small sacrifices eventually becomes a pattern of one-sided control. Psychologically, this tactic works in the short term because it triggers insecurity. Nobody wants to be accused of not loving enough, but long-term it breeds resentment and weakens attraction. Women may test boundaries, but a healthy woman will respect when you hold firm. A manipulative one will only push harder. The right response is calm strength. Instead of arguing or giving in, set a clear boundary. My love for you doesn't depend on passing tests. If we respect each other, we won't need these games. A woman who values you will understand. A woman who doesn't will reveal her true intentions. So here's the reflection. Have you ever found yourself pressured into proving your love through conditions? Share your story in the comments. You might help another man recognize manipulation before it takes root. When a woman says, "That's just how I am," it might sound like she's being authentic, but often it's a sign of stubbornness and unwillingness to grow. In relationships, no one is perfect. We all have habits, flaws, or behaviors that need adjustment. But when someone uses this phrase as a shield, what they're really saying is, "I don't want to take responsibility and I won't make the effort to improve." That mindset can block the possibility of a healthy, evolving partnership. Psychologists explain that healthy relationships thrive on adaptability. Both partners must be willing to adjust, compromise, and grow for the relationship to last. Saying, "That's just how I am," is a refusal of that process. For example, if she lashes out in anger and then excuses it by claiming that's just her nature, she's refusing accountability. Instead of working on emotional control, she demands you accept her harmful behavior without question. Consider a practical example. You express how much it hurts when she disrespects you during arguments. Instead of reflecting and adjusting, she dismisses you with, "That's just how I am, I speak my mind." Over time, this excuse becomes a wall that prevents any real progress. You end up carrying the burden of the relationship alone, while she hides behind immaturity. Machiavelli noted that leaders who refuse to adapt eventually lose power. The same is true in relationships. Growth is not optional, it's necessary. If she cannot take responsibility or adjust destructive behaviors, the relationship is doomed to repeat cycles of conflict. Love may bring you together, but only adaptability keeps you together. From a psychological perspective, this phrase often masks insecurity. People who feel vulnerable about change use "that's just how I am" as a defense, because changing would require admitting flaws, but refusing to change doesn't protect the relationship. It slowly destroys it. It's important to distinguish between genuine authenticity and rigid stubbornness. A woman who says, "This is who I am, but I'm working on being better," shows maturity. A woman who says, "This is who I am, take it or leave it," shows selfishness. And in most cases, the only wise response is to leave. So here's the reflection. Have you ever stayed with someone who excused bad behavior with, "That's just how I am"? How did it affect you in the long run? Share your experience in the comments, because recognizing this phrase early can save you years of wasted energy. The words people choose often reveal more truth than they realize. When a woman says things like, "I don't need a man," "You're too good for me," or "That's just how I am," she is showing you patterns that can block love, respect, and growth. Female psychology teaches us that ignoring these phrases leads to wasted time, broken trust, and emotional exhaustion. Machiavelli would say, "Take people at their words, because they often tell you who they really are." The key lesson is simple. Don't ignore red flags because of attraction or hope. Respect yourself enough to believe what you hear and walk away when the signs are clear. The right woman won't test your patience with manipulation, blame, or excuses. She'll show accountability, respect, and a willingness to grow with you. If this video opened your eyes, let me know your thoughts in the comments. And to prove you stayed until the very end, write "Sigh Insight" below. Your comment might help another man see the signs before it's too late.